Hello! Today on Flipping the Table, we offer the third in our four-part series from the June 2025 Old Salt Festival in Montana. Michael and Coco speak in two conversations. The first is with Anna Claussen and Ash Hanson, artistic and cultural collaborators who promote art, artists, and community dialogue. The second is with Matt Jorgensen, who cultivates small, high-value enterprises in a tiny modern village. The creative work of these three guests celebrates, energizes, and highlights rural people and rural communities, which are the underappreciated backbone of the urban and suburban communities of our nation. Enjoy the show.
I have spent the summer reading some history about the German peasants' uprising in the year 1525. Thousands of serfs tied for life to feudal properties went to war. They felt controlled and exploited by those privileged few who ruled the land. Hundreds of rural towns and villages formed armies of peasants who attacked and burned about half the castles and monasteries controlled by the billionaires of their time. The most compelling thing for me about this event was the ethos of the peasants. They were guided by principles that reflected their love of nature and its abundance, which they believed revealed God's desire for humans to be generous with one another, as God was with humans and all of life on the land. They sought a society where nature's abundance was shared more fairly, but in the end, the serfs were slaughtered by larger armies raised by kings. Mark Twain once wisely said, "History does not repeat, it rhymes." And I see the rhyme now to the wave of discontent back then. In the food system, banking, healthcare, energy, retailing, actually all aspects of life, a group of huge companies and politicians they own at all levels control too much of our lives. Rural regions have been particularly and deeply exploited. The abandoned centers of rural towns across the nation are the clear evidence. Not in all, but in too many places, wealth has been extracted to the benefit of too few who think too little about how much they take out of land and the people who work it. I'll say again, not all large farms harm and exploit. I know many that do a great job and have seen many small farms that do a poor job. But the fact is, in a world where less than 100 people have as much wealth as the bottom 4 billion, we are on dangerous ground. People are pissed, and for good reason. Our political situation today is one result, but the climate crisis, the loss of species, and all forms of pollution are all connected to a mentality of exploitation that comes from the abandonment of the idea that humans need to be generous with one another and with all of life forms upon which our good health and joy are based. The question is, what can be done? There is no silver bullet. There must be a variety of options or interventions in the system to create more fairness. Today's show was recorded in June at the Old Salt Festival, which is framed by the belief that land is kin, meaning we are related to land, must take good care of it, because from it comes all of life. My guests today are devotees of this framing of the world. Our first conversation is with two inspiring women. Anna Claussen is a Minnesota farm girl, now an urban dweller, who founded a program called Voices of Rural Resilience. She is an expert in connecting rural and urban identities, fears, and hopes, and teaching people how to care for one another, despite differences. Ash Hanson is an artist and the founder and CEO of the Department of Public Transformation, which is an organizational name I love. Ash has deep experience in using theater as an engine for inspiring change in minds, hearts, and places. Together, these women are a powerful team initiating engagements in rural communities that highlight artists and the arts and work to create more equality and power for rural regions. And then our second conversation is with social entrepreneur Matt Jorgensen, the founder of ReVillage. He has fostered a common space, shared ritual, and community infrastructure to support 7-generation vision for the Green Valley bioregion of West Sonoma County. He also founded the Cook Alliance, which was central to the effort to create a law in California that allows home cooks to create micro-enterprises, food businesses, out of their home kitchens. I know you will enjoy hearing these 3 creative people who are reminding us that we humans need one another, that our communities are interdependent. I think they can help us avoid the terrible path taken by those poor German serfs back in 1525. Let's begin. Ash and Anna, great to see you here at the Old Salt Festival in Helmville, Montana. What brought you? Listen to the clapping. There's a big talk going on behind us that just ended, the butchery demonstration. Go for it.
Well, thanks for having us, Michael. What brought me here is the fact that it feels like it's the convergence of 2 worlds I care deeply about in my work and my life, and that is growing up as a farmer's daughter and on a farm, and working now as an advocate and a builder of supply chains for regenerative beef and bison farmers. I'm also wearing the hat and wear the hat as a rural artist and cultural worker, and really love more than anything bringing people together who often don't get to spend an experience like this in the same space. Actually, what we're doing here, going through the elements and really building relationships together.
I mean the rain, the wind.
The rain and the wind.
It has been amazing.
Yeah, well, that's cool. We should say that Anna has been working with the Roots of Change team on the Graft Project, which many of our people will know about. So, Ash.
Yes.
How about you?
Yes. Well, so Anna and I run a podcast as well called Beyond the Clock. And I am the creative executive officer with Department of Public Transformation. And we support rural arts and cultural workers and curious rural communities who want to work more, integrate the arts into or creative strategies into their community development work. And so when Anna invited me to come to a festival, I, of course, said yes, especially at the intersection of land, use, and music and culture and Montana. So Anna invited me to join her at this festival, and also Department of Public Transformation is going to start doing some work in Montana, so it's an opportunity for us to come and connect with some folks here in the region, and hopefully start to bring some of our programming, again, supporting rural artists and infrastructure for creativity in rural places to Montana. We're currently in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota primarily, but we're starting to do more work across the country as well. And then our podcast elevates rural cultural workers from across the country, recognizing the important work like festivals like this have and do in our rural communities to bring folks together, especially in times of extreme isolation and disconnection and polarization.
Well, good. So give us an example. Give us some examples of rural cultural workers that you're talking about. What, Anna? Do you want to try that? And then
Absolutely. I always like to go with the first thing that comes to mind. And for me, I think a lot about, we call our podcast, and actually are convening for years. It started as being called Off the Clock, which is really the impetus of realizing that rural community work and cultural work across the country really happens outside of the hours of 9 to 5. So it happens at the VFW bar when you sit down and you deeply listen to somebody's story. And so when I think of our rural arts and cultural workers across the country, they're not necessarily in galleries, and they're not necessarily found where people say, show me where art exists in rural America or small towns. They're the people who use a creative practice to bridge or build or do something greater than what was there, create conversations. And it can take all kinds of forms. Sometimes it takes the form of theater. And Ash, I'll let Ash speak to that because she's a theater artist. But I also love where we meet other creative engagement artists and rural artists who use song, poetry, who use a form of actually just, like I said, listening and reiterating back to a community their story, their narrative, who they are, and starting that conversation.
And I'll give one
Gosh,
specific,
please,
one specific example. Beyond the Clock this year has an artist in residence, which we have for the last 3 years, and we invited an artist to come with us on the journey of interviewing other artists and then telling their stories back to them in different creative mediums. So this year we're working with Eliza Blue, who is a rancher and musician and writer in Bison, South Dakota, and she was here giving a talk at the
Land Talk Lounge.
Yeah,
here giving it,
behind us, right?
Sorry, here giving a talk at the Land Talk Lounge this morning, and reading stories that she's written and singing songs. And her real passion is around essentially like the theme of the festival here, Land is Kin, and she speaks so beautifully to just helping us understand our relationship to the prairie and how valuable it is, and just really being a voice for this landscape, that landscape. And those are the kinds of cultural workers we like to uplift and celebrate, those that are giving voice to those relatives, whether they're human relatives or non-human relatives, that need to be heard right now.
Wow, that reminds me of a talk that was earlier. After that, it was the two of the early founders of Old Salt Co-op, and one
Andrew
of them,
and Cole.
Yeah, Andrew, talking about. Actually, I guess Cole said it, that Andrew's wife speaks for the bears. It touches me, like in my heart.
Somebody's gotta. Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. I mean, I think I'll pick up on your emotion, because I get emotional about this too. I founded Voices for Rural Resilience 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I came from a career as a landscape architect, deeply caring about the land and using design skills to build a regenerative, environmentally climate-friendly place for us to live. And after about a decade in that field, I left it very sadly, but towards farm and food and egg policy, because I knew that was such a driver. And then that career brought me to realizing that even if we have the right policy in place, even if we have new markets, like we talk about here, and I know Cole and Andrew and many others here are building, expanding markets, there's still a social change and a barrier to that change that exists within our communities. Whether it's for the farmers or the producers to be accepted, to change a practice that has been done for some time. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I get passionate about it too, of how do we speak, yes, for the non-human kin that move across this landscape, how do we speak for the landscape, but how do we actually find our voice and have conversations instead of just never getting there with the tensions that exist that actually keep us, I think, from doing our best for the world and for the environment.
and for our communities. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I do think there's a group here that's one of the sponsors called The World Within, and I was asking one of the co-founders why that name, and it was funny. She offered what she thought, but we got into it a little more. It was about, I think what it's about, because she's, well, what do you think? The world within is just as important as the world without when you're trying to make change. Everybody has to go in and try and figure out how they're going to respond, whether they're going to respond to whatever the world is telling us at a certain moment. Like we're in that right now in this country, right? Like bad things are happening to immigrants, and people are having to decide, where am I going to come down on that?
Mm-hmm.
That's the world within.
Oh, absolutely.
That's right. That's right. And that's where I think for both of us too, working specifically with artists, and we've seen here on the stage here how these stories coming out in the form of song or in the form of poetry really can help us tap into that world within on a deeper, molecular level, and really start to shift those hearts and minds and connect those hearts and minds around a shared experience.
Yeah.
I get really passionate when you talk about looking inward. And in a lot of the work I do, I love facilitating the opportunity for people to look and expand their own identities. Mm-hmm. I think we live in a time where we want to quickly aggregate groups of people so we can make sense of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then we're always looking like, how do I shift those people to think differently or vote differently or do something differently? And a lot of the work that brings me a lot of joy is helping people realize if we didn't have our own identities that we feel like have isolating, polarizing parts of them, and we said, you know what? This is my example. Like, I had to really wrestle with the fact that I am the daughter of a conventional egg farmer and grew up on a conventional farm. And then I was deep in sustainable ag advocacy work. And people would meet and say, those things can't live together. And it made me really realize that we need space to wrestle with holding complex identities so that we don't do this same act of seeing things too simply and seeing people and groups of people and oversimplifying them. Because then we're really not going to be able to build resiliency in our communities and in our landscapes.
I think that's one of our main drivers of division. If I personally were to label one, I think it's an ability to accept differences of you and I, that we don't have to match all the way 100%.
Yeah.
That we can match the 10% that we agree on, and we can talk about the other 90 if we want to.
And that 2, 3, 4, 5 things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
There's just isn't one
And
truth.
even more so when you bring an artist in, not only can we agree, we can actually find great joy. And I love nothing more than putting two people in a room who think they're not going to get along and watching them fall in love with each other. And arts and creative people are really good at listening, at intuitively feeling like what's present in a room, and then being like, let's have fun with this. Let's make something happen here.
Yeah. That helping people fall in love with each other, but then also helping them fall in love with their place is another big piece of it too. Whether you want to call it the world of creative placemaking or placekeeping, or just this idea of sense of place or pride of place. When we have a guide bringing us on a journey of helping us either fall back in love with a place or find new connections to a place, and that is essential for stewardship, for land stewardship. And we're not going to tend to something that we don't care about, that we don't love. And a lot of the artists that we work with are about that, are about helping us fall back in love or fall in love for the first time with our places and the people that inhabit them.
I mean, just listening, so we have a whole bunch of artists in the background. Maybe you can hear some of them. But of course, with a lot of musicians, they call to why they were inspired for that piece at the beginning. I think we're hearing that. But even, I just want to recognize that with the programming that this Old Salt Festival has developed, it's not just talks, it's conversations, it's poetry. It has so many, this, of course, musical and song component as well, but really recognizing that
food.
Food is a unity overall, but recognizing that the unity and community that they're building and striving for, not just in Montana and not just within the regenerative meat space, but even broader, is cultivated so much more so, beyond and with that human element that really goes into the arts as well. I think that's really well emulated here.
Yeah, I do. It is beautiful, and it is, the heart needing to open right now in the world. Because we, in a way, I was thinking about one of the problems that we have in agriculture, particularly in California, is that a lot of the agricultural land is owned by people that don't even live there. They live in San Francisco or Los Angeles, and they own all the land where the strawberries are grown, and they lease that land to farmers. So the love does not exist between the landowner. And it's very hard for the farmer who's leasing that land at $5,000 an acre and has to do 3 crops to make any profit to fall in love, because they're under so much pressure. So that system is just, it doesn't really work if you're thinking about resilience. The other thing that occurred to me as I listened to you both is this idea of, because the previous conversation we had was about the complexity that comes from regenerative systems in terms of phytonutrients. The more regenerative, the more nutrients there are in the meat or the crop. And what you're talking about is the more complexity there is, these multiple realities at one time, the more resilience there can exist if it's held correctly in a certain way.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't have said it any better. That was beautifully put. And I think that part of that too is around this idea of story and the stories we tell ourselves and the stories that are told to us about our places. And what I love about what I've just learned about your podcast and celebrating agrarian communities and rural communities, there are so many stories told about rural places that are damaging and just demeaning, frankly not true. And we have internalized a lot of those stories. One of the things that Anna and I set off on for this season of Beyond the Clock in our podcast was inspired by a quote from a storyteller named Martin Shaw. And the quote says, "Good storytellers cast spells. Great storytellers break them." And what we need right now are the great storytellers to break the spells and the myths that have been put upon our places and our people.
Regenerative agriculture is doing that in a certain way, because the media's picking it up, movie makers are picking it up, artists are picking it up. They're here. They came to this place.
And I just want to, we came to this place from another important principle of the work that Ash and I both do, which is invitation. And a big shout out to the Mannix family for making an invitation. There's no light lift in making an invitation to come, particularly in America and our legal system, onto private land.
Right.
And that's why, comparing around the world, why we're where we are, where things are really hard to have the experience of an agrarian because we're very privatized, our landscape. It really takes a lot of big, bold moves to make invitations and hold space and create space for people to come together on the land, not just in a virtual world, but to have an experience together.
God, that made me think about something that was said the first morning we were here. Kat Taylor was speaking. I don't know if you know who she is, but she's an investor and has a regenerative ranch in California. And she was talking about her journey to realize that we had to work with the beginning of this country from the European standpoint, like the taking of land.
Yeah.
And it was this theater full of ranchers who are living on land that was taken from Native Americans. And I thought about, that is an incredibly hard thing to heal. How do you deal with that? It's going to be through the arts.
Absolutely.
Because the law's not going to do it, because that just gets ugly. You see it already around reparations. So it just gets a hard fight, right? So talk about how that underlying huge problem in rural lands and ranch lands.
I can bring another friend of ours into the room because I think this might be better by example. There's a farmer in Central Valley in California, Nikiko Masamoto and the Masamoto family.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
Nikiko.
yeah,
So I think about her when I think about healing.
I know her dad better, but
okay.
yeah.
Yes. And her work with the Remembering Project, the Onsai Remembering Project, and really helping to connect the Japanese folks who were in the Japanese internment camps back to the land, and her multi generations of farming, and just those memory walks through the land and talking about all of the different inhabitants in the deep time that we have here, and what has been removed and what has caused things or people to be removed over time, and really grappling with and understanding and making space to grieve it, all of it, and to really respect and honor the stewards that came before. I think those moments of like remembering together, so that we can imagine together what the future looks like. Like, we have to be able to do both. We have to be able to hold memory and complexity, like we've already been saying, and making that space for grief and that ambiguous loss that we are all feeling.
Yes.
And I do think that cultural workers like Nikiko can really hold those complex spaces so powerfully. And I think we need to look to our artists a lot more to help us with that and pay them for their work.
Yes.
I think the piece I want to lift up, because we've mentioned Beyond the Clock, one of our collaborations, and we've mentioned it as a podcast, but that's not where it started, or even, that gives us a different reach. But we started creating this virtual gathering space before the virtual world was a thing, before 2020, because it is very isolating doing rural work and rural cultural work, because you're often at the front edge of pushing social change. And speaking of healing, artists, I think, play an incredible, important role in helping our world heal, our communities heal, our people heal, but it's exhausting. So Beyond the Clock at its core is to bring together, but not physically, stay in your place. We need you in that small town of 37 people, or wherever it is, but you can't do this work if you feel alone, especially when your work is the work of healing others. You need a place to fall back and rest in a community of people who get it. And that's how Beyond the Clock started. And so really, we host monthly or bi-monthly, depending on our season and our year, spaces, and anyone's invited. You don't have to be an artist, a rural culture worker, or a rural person. You could just be rural curious, we say. But it is a space that's really, even virtually, meant to be vulnerable. And it is whatever it needs to be every month we gather. And I think it's a reminder that it's important to pay artists, lift up artists, and then continue to build support systems for them and our communities.
I love that.
Yeah, and I think, when we're talking about rural, right, about 20% of the population lives in rural places, depending on how you define it. And then in terms of philanthropic dollars, at least only 7% of philanthropic dollars goes into rural communities. When you're talking about the arts, less than 3% goes into rural places, like how the arts are distributed in
how
philanthropy.
the art funding is
art funding is distributed. And so, if every philanthropic donor doubled what they were giving to rural, we still wouldn't be an equitable distribution.
Right.
And so, a lot of our work too is advocating for that. Not that it all has to come from private, foundations, but just as an example of, where the discrepancy or disparity lies. Rural is often just like left out of the conversation. And then when we're talking about rural artists, it's even more so. So that's a lot of why we try to, help be that support network and bridge network, because we see the rural artists we know doing such incredible work, and we want to try to get resources to them and lift up those stories as best we can.
And shout out back to Land is Kin. That is a percentage looking at population. When were we to speak up and speak for the land and the animals and the birds, then even more so, I feel like the role of rural communities being able to play that role and be supported to do it is undervalued.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm thinking about Wendell Berry, because he's the poet, kind of like the philosopher king behind the world that I come from, the sustainable agriculture, regenerative world. He's an agrarian. I mean, he's fighting for the agrarian world to be reborn, or the agrarian frame, the openness to the agrarian society and culture. And I mean, he feels like he's failed. His daughter recently told me that, and which is sad to me, because I don't actually think, if you look at this event, if you look at other things going on in the country, I think there is some re-emergence happening, I think.
Absolutely.
Look how many young people are going into farming.
Yeah.
Who didn't grow up on a farm.
Absolutely. And being able to, I think see and witness and learn in this urban-rural context, which I think is really cool about this event, but also some of the work that Anna has shepherded in Minnesota with Art of the Rural and the Rural-Urban Exchange, and really starting to look at how we're connecting our urban and rural communities in cultivating the next generation of rural dwellers. I think that, there is a movement.
Yes.
And we got to be ready.
Montana's getting overrun.
And that's the thing, is it overrun, or is it what is the goal?
Yes.
How do we decide that together?
Maybe it's repopulating.
Right. And what is what is the right invitation, and how do we introduce this place to folks in a way that helps them really understand and care about it, and not just bring their ideals from where they come from and put them in here. But I think that cultural translation is really key to that. And if we have, again, events like this where everybody's saying, like, this is how we do it in Montana, y'all get on board, it feels really good. I feel like, I live in Utah, I'm from Minnesota, but being in Montana, I feel like Montanans are really good at telling you how to do it in Montana. And I'm like, great, I appreciate that. Thank you. I will learn. I will listen and learn.
That's good. Yeah. I was just thinking about our work around trying to bring urban and rural together. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. I can talk about it. So we at Roots of Change, since partially before January, but we've started having these really in-depth and kind of tense, just in the topic conversations about what is going on with the country overall. And I think one of the main things that we've landed on is that there is an urban-rural divide, like you mentioned, and that doesn't exclude the divisions and tension that exists within rural communities and within urban communities independently. But we think that that's at least with urban-rural, that's a way to term so much of what's happening, and that even from, like, of course, we all come from a food perspective here, but with that, it's even just considering, I live in an urban setting and I'm shopping for food for my kid, and I don't know where this is coming from, but I sometimes you don't even know, like, whether to think on that, and then you turn to a rural setting and I'm looking to feed my kid, and sometimes those things that are even grown in your community aren't available. And that's just to use one example that's very focal of the desire to perpetuate a healthy livelihood for your children. And it goes so much more beyond that, but we're working on developing a campaign. We're calling it Vote for Your Food. And it's really looking at how we can, right now it's looking at how we can bring together different conversations of people from rural and urban communities and engage them in considering it's not really considering what's happening, but maybe where can we align and what opportunities are there for finding unity, and because something has to be done. I mean, we all feel it. It's whether it's an internal tension or you're seeing like whatever's happening around you or in the news, there's something.
Yeah, it's like how can the food system be a healer? You're using art as a healer. The food system is a healer. And there's a linkage there. There's an overlap between food and art and the need to create spaces and moments where people can align again, find their connections.
Well, food is art. I'd love to share a little bit of insights, and I can't wait because we know each other. I hope we get to collaborate on some of this.
Yes, I'm thinking about it all the time. How do we get on this work? So,
yeah. Because when you say rural-urban divide, which I've used the term myself so much in my life, but I think that starts right there. I mean, we already consider that it's an either-or. And back to our identities. You're rural or you're urban. And I understand it because place is so meaningful to us. It's where we root our feet and our families and our communities. But most of us share a complex identity of rural and urban, but we don't have the space or give ourselves the permission to hold both ends. So at best, it's a rural-urban spectrum, but usually it's a divide. You're somewhere on one side of it, and then we've already attached a whole bunch of other divides that go with that, political, socioeconomic.
Right.
So in the work we do as artists, my tools I usually talk about are deploying empathy building skills. And one of those is really inviting people into this inner work. If you can own your own duality, because we're experiencing this divide now, I feel, because we are these 3 generations removed from industrialization, where before we understood, oh yeah, my brother moved to town and I stayed here, and he's doing the city things, and I'm stewarding the natural resources, and then we are interdependent, and we feel that shared value, and we've lost it naturally over those generations. But when we mentioned the rural-urban exchange, an Art of the Rural who's been doing this for over a decade, convening this in Kentucky, and we were fortunate enough to do some of this work in Minnesota. Everyone who really was drawn to this work, to come and be in this 2-year leadership program, shared those complex identities. Or they wanted that invitation. They were very urban or very rural, and they feel like they needed an invitation into the other communities in a place, in a container that was held for them. So I'm still just a huge advocate of the inner work. The world within is just a great metaphor for that, and using that to extrapolate out how we manage really bridging the other.
Yeah, it's interesting because I totally agree with what you're saying. And then after every election, I look at the map and I see the divide, urban and rural. It's pretty incredible. So there is a reality to something there that we have to hold these. We have to figure out hold the complexity of that and the contradictions of that, and not deny it. But how do you do that without polarizing? That's the challenge.
Well, and also we have to say, and who are those map makers, and what message are they trying to tell us? Because if we just look at the sheer population in rural and who has who votes in rural, the numbers just don't add up, right? 20% of the country is rural. If every single rural person voted one certain direction, but of course we're talking about the Electoral College, and of course if you want to be mad at the Electoral College, I always say be mad at the Electoral College, but don't be mad at rural folk. Like, be mad at the system, but not the individuals. And when we're painting these red and blue, it doesn't do, and no, and it's also not. It's not. A lot of folks just talk about like the shades of purple in between, but those, it's not even like we vote. Those maps are based on one day every 4 years, or
every
maybe
2 years.
or every 2 years for But like when we're talking about federal and presidential elections, and that is again not asking the real the questions of why and the values and where we're at and how did we get here. It's just saying like, well, we're blue or we're red or we're this or we're that or we're urban or we're rural, and rather than saying like, okay, where are the commonalities here? Where are the spots in which we are seeing, folks showing up that are really civically engaged? Why are they really civically engaged? Are they civically engaged just in their voting habits, or are they is volunteerism high here? Like, how are we looking at our daily lives of who's engaging and how and why, and who's being invited into that process, rather than just or how many people actually showed up to vote, not just who voted,
Right.
or where it landed, rather. There's just so much more interesting questions I think we could be asking
Yes.
when we look at these maps, and rather we just look at them and we're like, ugh.
No, though they're an invitation to go deeper. I totally agree with that. I mean, we're running out of time here, and they're about to start something behind us. I think they're going to do a film, maybe. But anyway, there's a lot to be talked about, and there's a lot to be done in this space. This idea of how you build trust, understanding, alignment, because this is actually a good example. I mean, that was, I don't know what everybody's party is here. I think this is a pretty progressive group of ranchers, but I think it's not all that way. And she got an ovation. I mean, Kat got an ovation after she said that about land. I mean, she got an ovation. So, I mean, it's interesting. I think that there are places where people who vote one way or the other can come together. Doesn't matter what the frickin' vote is, because the vote has a lot to do with their family history and all kinds of stuff. Right. It's very complex. But it is something, it's a way for people in this country to start to say, how do I cross that line? There is a line if you look at the maps. How do I cross it?
Yeah. Better yet, how do we see each other and not see the lines?
Yeah.
How do we create spaces like this here at Old Salt where we're not focused on that, and actually you start to really expand beyond. We're back in our own worlds, and we get caught in that, trying to make sense of the big world out there through maps, through lines, through divisions. Right. And I think, back to Eliza Blue, who kicked us off this morning, I think, what if we made sense of the world through experiences, and ones that deeply resonated so much that you took them with you in relationships with each other, with your neighbors, but with your neighbors that are not all your human neighbors.
Right.
She said, whether or not the birds sing back to you, that could be a way in which we're judging whether or not we're a good neighbor.
I like that, because my Blue Jays love me. Anyway, so we'll end with that. That's a good one. All right. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate this conversation with you, Ash and Anna.
Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed the conversation with Anna and Ash. Before we hear the next conversation, let me remind you that Flipping the Table needs your support. Please rate us and leave us a review. It helps to spread the word and build support for a more healthy, resilient, and fair food system. Now let's hear a conversation with Matt Jorgensen of Ree Village at the Old Salt Festival.
Matt, it is great to be with you here at the Old Salt Festival, which everybody can hear in the background. So tell us, what are you doing here? Because we heard you're doing something cool. What is it?
Great to be with you, Michael and Coco. I'm out here from Sonoma County, as I know you are as well, Sonoma County, California. And the project we're working on out there is called Ree Village. Ree Village Green Valley is our starting point, which is the watershed out in West Sonoma County.
Beautiful area.
Yes.
You got coho salmon coming back in here.
We do, and bears.
And
bears on the beaches.
Bears on the beaches. Wow. That's cool. So, Ree Village. Define what it is.
At the highest level, we're sort of reacting to this isolation that people are feeling, in the sense that they have to do it alone, which is creating a lot of the breakdown of our time. And so the project is focused at the highest level on just simply remembering our interdependence with each other and the living earth, which only happens in very specific places. So at a watershed scale, we're working on rebuilding commons, community infrastructure, and shared culture. And so bringing back that heartbeat of interconnection with each other and with place. And once we do that, once we fall in love again with our watershed, with the people around us, the rest kind of takes care of itself. And that's our theory of change.
I like it. Particularly in the aftermath of COVID and in the times we're living in, where there's a lot of energy to kind of separate.
Yeah.
So that's good news. So who's all involved? Who do you work with? Do you have partners?
Yeah.
Farms? What are you doing?
Yeah, and I think people are really hungry for it. As you know, I spent about 10 years legalizing home cooking microenterprise in California.
Which has done a lot, by the way.
Yeah, so we passed some state laws in California and other states around the country to create this framework for small food basically taking back microbusiness, exactly. And one of the realizations for me in doing that was just how hard it is to tackle, as you all are probably very well aware, how difficult it is to challenge this system in fragmented ways. And so my solution to that has been really relocalizing and trying to bring back multiple avenues of collaboration at a very local level. And so we've been working very closely with Sonoma County, and specifically we're in an unincorporated community called Grayton.
Love Grayton.
And
great restaurants there.
Grayton's got a couple great restaurants, and about 80% of the town is for rent or sale right now. It was an apple canning town, and it became a wine production town. And with both of those industries in decline, there's a lot of space for sale, a lot of derelict buildings and lots. And so our first project was buying the center of town, which was a gas station for the last 50, 60 years.
On the corner there.
Right on the corner next to that restaurant that you've probably been to.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
and we raised funding from the Sonoma Land Trust and Sonoma County Public Infrastructure Fund, as well as private philanthropy and crowdfunding, to take that off of the speculative market, get it into community ownership, and turn it into a town square. And so we've been, replanting native plants, hauling out, doing a lot of remediation and just cleanup work on it, building a stage, doing seasonal festivals, and really making it a place sort of like a portal into the village visioning process for our local village of Grayton, which is 2,000 people, but also our watershed, which is about 15,000 people of the Green Valley of Tescadero. And to us, it's sort of just the first step into a multifaceted project of recommoning and reclaiming community infrastructure. So my home food microenterprise work will be a part of it. We're also in conversation about acquiring a community farm just right on the south side of town to do incubation. And also most of the old industrial space is up for sale. And so we're looking at this thinking about, what's the next chapter economically of a viable food system, and maybe instead of large scale wine processing or apple canning, maybe it turns into micro-processing for the small farms and herbalists who want to create products. And so looking at upcycling these buildings into really a thriving, relocalized economy and a culture that is primed to support that.
I can see Coco's eyes lighting up because of projects she's managing for us right now. Reach the Change.
We're working on a resilient food systems infrastructure project, but specifically we're mapping a lot of the infrastructure across the state that's really focused on small and mid-sized producers.
Oh, beautiful.
And it's incredible because a lot of the conversations we've been having, you talk about food production and processing, and that when you think big scale as this canning and only one type of thing, and then we're having these conversations that are really focused on how can we leverage commercial kitchens to make soups that are then freeze dried or dried for emergency medicine or emergency response, for example, or even just community sale. And that sounds like it aligns really well, but even just in the way that you're thinking about what are the, as you call it, the microprocessing opportunities, looking at that.
So we're going to map this now.
Oh, I think we're going to have to compare notes and definitely take stock of what you've already looked at, because we've been trying to figure out, our next development project is the old firehouse and train station in Grayton, which has also been empty for 20 years, turning that into a food hub and maker marketplace. And we're partnering with a chef couple that has a business called Preservatory, which is all about taking agricultural overstock and turning it into value-added sauces and jams, and also doing seasonal fresh food. So we'll have a cafe there. It's going to be a community-owned building and a community-owned, we're calling it a public house. So can we create sort of some daily ritual around engaging with the food system and actually tapping into some of these problems which you're highlighting, which are, we actually have... There's fruit rotting on the ground all around me. There's farmers going out of business all around me. And so how can we start to, rather than it just be an import-export economy, relocalize some of those core functions and make, it more accessible for us as local consumers and also more of a livelihood support for our food and ag locally.
So when did you purchase that town square, make that transition?
Just a year and a half ago. So we closed escrow in February of 2024, and really the first year was kind of like remediation, and they had just closed they'd done the leaky underground storage remediation, but our first year was, hauling out trash and rubble, replanting, sheet mulching, starting to get the community just engaged in kind of a pop-up capacity. And then this year we're finishing our permitting process and starting to build permanent infrastructure. So in the meantime, it's been this really beautiful, just like symbolic project for the community. And so we've had I put a shipping container on there that's all glass walls, and we called it the Museum of the Future. And so we did 7 generations past of archival images and people bringing memorabilia and stories of what this place has been and the essence of this place. And then 7 generations forward, bringing school kids to do visioning about, what's our vision for a thriving village, a thriving watershed that we're investing in now for, generations beyond ourselves. And I think, in part because it's been a blank canvas, it's literally a dirt lot. It's been this really amazing opportunity to get people into a co-dreaming of what this could be, and it's all interconnected, but people need something tangible. And shoveling mulch together once a month with a potluck and a community jam, that creates this sense of we're creating something together, and I think becomes the jumping off point for the work that I know we're all interested in, which is, how does it ladder up into systemic change and resilience?
That's cool. And I'm curious about, I live in Sonoma County, and I'm really embarrassed that I was not aware of this, because I'm certainly aware of your work in the past and the success, and that somehow I have been busy, but this is like I'm out of the loop on this. It's embarrassing. But I was wondering a couple things. So is the Sebastopol Grange connected? Are there people from the Grange that you're working with or know about it? Or?
Yeah, there's definitely people at the Grange that are active volunteers, and we haven't had a formal partnership with them, but we've had, really we've been super local with the Grayton community, because it's such a symbolic project for that community that we've set up a very local council, and we have a design build council, an arts council, and sort of a community guidance council, and that's all been really, really local. And then
which makes sense, because what you're trying to really do is bring that back. Foster that.
Right. And I think that we're speaking bioregionally, wanting to connect bioregionally, and so we're also now working on more of a bioregional scale collaborative that's going to pull in Sonoma State and partners like, we hope, the Grayton Rancheria, and Sonoma County is very involved, and a number of the other anchor institutions, of which, to me, a lot of the innovations, so-called, that we're looking for in terms of local resiliency are really a remembering. And I think that the Grange is a perfect example of the type of remembering we need to do. It's not rocket science. It's actually a potluck, for example, gets us a lot of the way towards remembering our interdependence and investing behind that. So they'd be a great partner. We're also talking to the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center about a co-design project. I feel that we have an embarrassment of riches in West Sonoma County, and we've just been taking it one step at a time and making sure that when we do engage, it can be super high integrity, and the beginning has just been very local. So the Grayton Day Labor Center, the Grayton Community Club, the Grayton Zen Center, these have all been anchor partners because they're right there, and this first project is so local. But as we start to move into these bigger food systems and local economy projects, we need more partners, and we're open to it.
I like the way you're doing it, though. You go slow to go fast in the end, right?
Yeah.
You're building a good root structure, so to speak. Is Joseph McIntyre related? Have you dealt with Joseph at all?
Yeah, he's a neighbor of mine.
I was going to say,
lives 3 houses down.
Okay, because he used to work for Roots of Change with us when he was running Ag Innovations. Yeah. So that's amazing. I'm glad to hear that. He's a great guy. I'm glad, and he got elected to some body that's probably helpful to you guys.
Well, actually, so we didn't. I started to speak about how Grayton's an unincorporated town. Mm-hmm. The only legal governmental structure that's existed has been the Grayton Community Services District, which is what Joseph was just elected to. For 30 years, they just did sewer services for Grayton, but those are pretty flexible. Special districts are quite flexible local government entities, and so this year we expanded their mandate to do not just sewer but also Parks and Rec. So the grant money that I got was actually to purchase the land directly into Grayton Community Services District stewardship, and that felt, I've done a lot of work with land trusts and community land trusts and cooperative structures, perpetual purpose trust structures, but somehow tethering it to a locally elected board in Grayton felt like the right path for this particular, very core piece of land and commons.
Well, the thing that's beautiful about it is this idea, resilience depends upon a good root structure, and you're building, what is it, human capital and institutional capital or government kind of capital structure that will hopefully defend you over time, because things change and fires, COVIDs, things like that. I mean, money flows. You can use that. You might want to talk a little bit about what we're trying to do with that white paper.
So we've been working on this white paper related to both food as medicine and emergency response, specifically with food. They started through a project in Stockton with a food as medicine approach with food boxes that were being delivered, but then also during COVID with offering grocery vouchers to really underserved communities. Handing out thousands of grocery vouchers during that time.
30,000 families. Wow.
Yeah.
$44 million we put out.
And as we were looking at that work that was done, 4 or 5 years ago now, or started 4 or 5 years ago, there was this element of, and how do we loop in really the food system at its core to these elements of just response, both on like a chronic scale and on an emergent scale.
Yes.
And so what you're mentioning is incredibly interesting, because even you're creating the community and the community that's necessary in creating that response, whether it's, again, fast or slow. Something central to this paper that we're developing is really also just looking at how community-based organizations, so CBO networks, are instrumental in not only reaching the community, but understanding what those needs are and developing it, and looking at, well, how do we loop in the food system to become not necessarily a CBO in that, but a direct actor
a source of the food,
to providing that.
Totally.
And I mean, I brought up emergency response earlier, and up in Northern California, they've got a great new project that's kind of focused on that. Some new grant that was brought together of really looking at how can we leverage the food system to be that first responder in feeding their communities.
Beautiful.
And I mean, what you're talking about is directly how you're looking at it from a community scale level.
I love all of that so much. I mean, I'll give you one example, which is we just got a small grant we're a hybrid organization. So we have a nonprofit called Revillage, and we also have a public benefit development company that's working on steward ownership for all of these projects. And we'll do everything exit to community ownership, but be able to take impact capital into those structures.
You could have been in that talk early this morning. It would have
I
been
definitely
perfect.
resonated with it.
Yeah.
So one small example, I think, related to what you're talking about is traditional medicinals, a Grayton-based business, just gave us a small grant focused around their desire to do community medicine making and democratize access to food as medicine. And it's an impact forward organization, but as a food producer, focused actually here in Sonoma County. Ironically, all of their impact focus has been on their global supply chain. And so they haven't really done anything close to home, but they're really interested in starting to build a local CBO network and be part of this question of, not only democratizing medicine making and food as medicine, but also being in an engaged community, so that as we all know these crises are going to keep happening. How do we respond together, and how can some of our local businesses, our local food economy actors, not just be rattled by global supply chain shocks, but also be integrated with community level response? So I think we're definitely working on rowing a very similar boat here.
That's beautiful. I know you're going to be on stage. We got about 5 minutes left. So I'm kind of curious. You speak our language. You have been innovative for years. The work you did around micro enterprise, home cooks. I mean, we were just talking to people in LA about it last week, because it's part of this infrastructure study we're doing. People can scale from that into a commercial kitchen.
That's right. Yep.
So what brought you to this? What's the path that got you to this kind of work?
It's funny. I from a very young age had been let's call it a skeptical entrepreneur. I mean, I was raised into a Jewish American family that told me from a very young age that I was supposed to start a business, and at the same time I had a really critical eye at how it was working according to my estimation. And after college I was doing a lot of economic organizing and labor organizing, and for example with groups like the National Domestic Workers Alliance, organizing with marginalized populations, and realizing that over and over again, it was coming back to food. It's like the inescapable
She just was saying
core
the same thing to me.
of every, it's the roots of change.
Right.
I think so. if you think about the essential pillars of human life and our interaction with the planet, you can organize around economic systems as much as you want, but if you don't go down to root cause, and some of that is legal systems, some of that is social structure and cultural structure, but
Finance.
the lowest common denominator for most of it is food.
Yeah,
and
food, yep.
so I like to say that I became a kitchen table organizer because that was just the best place to be a community organizer, and I guess I've stayed there for the last 10 or 15 years.
And you passed the state law.
Yeah.
And you passed the state law. And you should be proud of that because it's affected people, a lot of people up and down the state. So
Thank you.
Congratulations on that. So we definitely have to stay in touch.
Yes.
I want to come out and see what. Can
Please.
I come over and
Absolutely.
get a little tour?
Absolutely. And
my team comes every couple of months. We have a meeting.
Yes.
In Sonoma County at my office. What we'll do is
let's do a field trip.
We'll do
Let's
a field trip. And we'll come to Grayton.
And
check it out.
I'm all about really low threshold entry points for people. Your team doesn't need it, but for my community, it can be very, very heady talking to people about the food system or economic relocalization. And so last week I bought a coffee cart, and so this summer I'll just be slanging iced coffee out on the corner and starting this conversation about, hey, you can be a community owner of this firehouse, this food hub, and we're going to be serving coffee every day, but we're also going to be doing things to uplift our local food economy, and do you want to be part of it? So we'll have you guys over for an iced coffee, and I guess that's our cue.
That's our cue. That's amazing. We're having a lightning storm and rainstorm here in Helmville, Montana at the Old Salt Festival. And Matt, it's been a great pleasure. So glad we ran into you here, man.
Thank you, Michael
great.
and Coco. Really good to be with you, and excited to reconvene in Sonoma County.
That'll be great. Thanks.
All right, be well.
We hope you enjoyed the show. Please share it with your friends and listen to our next monthly episode of Flipping the Table, hosted by Roots of Change, a program of the Public Health Institute, a nonprofit organization dedicated to building a healthier world.